So we'll talk about our Thanksgiving memories later on in the show, but with someone who has a birthday in 10 days, not plugging anything. Otherwise, Otis, 2 days over Thanksgiving. I hate this holiday. You try to never get gifts around that time for those who love a holiday around then. Love my uncle, got a Christmas present from him as a birthday combo present. Same with most of the rest of my family. So let's talk.
That's laziness.
That's what it is. That's what happens in most situations. By the way, we're talking sports stuff today. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
I'm Anthony Strait.
And this is your pre-Thanksgiving helping of On the Sports Lines. Thanksgiving means football. We'll get our fill of the Giants, the Jets, and answer that age-old question or that joke that says, so Cam Newton, Odell Beckham, and Aaron Rodgers walk into a bar and none of them vaccinated later on in the show. But we have other sports to talk about too, starting with the national pastime and America's truest turkey, the New York Mets. After a GM search that can be summed up in the simple four words: no, sorry, pass, and bye. Popular seventh choice and former Angels GM Billy Eppler became Mets GM, replacing a bunch of people. I can't really write that all in one paragraph. And oh yeah, former stalwart of the rotation, Noah Syndergaard, is leaving the Mets for the Los Angeles Angels. I know, for those who's asking, those two moves are separate moves and not actually part of a trade.
Just coincidental.
Let's start with Jay. Billy Eppler has done amazing things for the Angels, like hiring Mickey Callaway after he got fired with the Mets. Is Billy a good hire?
Well, I mean, look, Epler's been out of baseball for a year, but he has plenty of GM experience, having held a position with the aforementioned Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, and plenty of New York experience cutting his front office teeth under Brian Cashman with the Yankees. He was in Anaheim for 5 years, dismissed after the 2020 season. Angels had a losing record during his tenure, despite having Mike Trout, arguably the best player in the game, and despite Eppler acquiring Anthony Rendon and Shohei Ohtani. The Angels were unable to develop effective pitching staffs either through the draft or via free agency, with Eppler running things, and that's at least a yellow flag, if not an outright red one, for a team in the Mets that is very much about its pitching staff and continuing to draft, sign, and develop pitchers. Epler's a scout by nature and by trade. He learned from one of the best in the business in the late Gene Michael with the Yankees. Michael was actually the one who sent Eppler to Japan to broaden the Yankee scouting horizons, and that's where Eppler met a teenaged Ohtani. That relationship obviously paid off for Eppler down the road. Eppler spent 11 years with the Yankees, rising to director of pro scouting and then VP and assistant GM under Cashman. His tenure in Anaheim was also a little scandal-plagued. Not that it stopped the Mets from offering him the job. You guys will remember all of these. Starting pitcher Tyler Skaggs passed away in 2019 after taking a mix of ethanol, fentanyl, and oxycodone. Eric Kay, the team's former communications director, is alleged to have supplied Skaggs with the drugs. Trial is set for January. A defamation lawsuit brought against the club and the league by former Angels clubhouse attendant Brian Harkins was dismissed last month. Harkins had been fired for allegedly supplying a blend of rosin and pine tar to pitchers in the visiting clubhouse. And Eppler signed off on the hiring of former Mets manager Mickey Callaway as the team's pitching coach ahead of the 2020 season. Callaway was placed on the sports ineligible list this summer after The Athletic reported on multiple instances of sexual harassment across Callaway's previous tenures in Cleveland and New York. Now, then again, with how involved owner Art Moreno is in everything, some of the things that went wrong may not have been all on Eppler, but it does give him experience with a hands-on owner. How he ultimately fits into the Mets front office hierarchy will be worth watching. The Mets still have designs on going after current Brewers president of baseball operations, David Stearns, after his contract expires next season, and he is interested in the job as he does have a prior connection to the organization. Team president Sandy Alderson said last week that any hire this winter would, quote, have at least a year runway to demonstrate their ability and their potential. Alderson also said last week that his role in the new front office, quote, will depend on who the general manager is and what level of experience they have. Eppler does bring plenty of experience, even if it didn't produce a winner on the field in Anaheim. If he has his eyes wide open about what he's walking into, then it's not a bad hire, and he'll have a full season to show that he still has the chops as a GM, especially in a big market like New York.
It's not a bad hire, but it's an hire. It
Right,
sounds
because
like
it's not the actual hire
he's
that
not.
they
No, he's
want
not the first. Like I
first.
said, he's not the first
So
choice. He's not the second choice. He's not the third choice. He doesn't even seem like the fifth choice. But he worked well with Cohen in talks. So that's something. They hit it
yeah,
off. So that'll be something because you
and
need to have that combination between the GM and the owner because you don't want each undercutting the other. So that's the
no,
most
and
important
and
part.
honestly, Rabbi, considering all the other guys that they have kind of tossed into the mix who have no GM experience, Eppler at least has 5 years of being a GM and 11 years prior to that in the Yankees organization. So he's got plenty of experience
Yeah.
in what matters. So I mean, I think that Alderson will start to back off and let Eppler show that he can do the job. How it's going to work out once and if Stearns comes on board the following season, how those two will work together, if they'll even work together, that'll be the storyline that's going to be worth watching.
The fans wanted a home run hire, they got a double. Anthony, let's talk about America's favorite Twitter account going west. As a Met fan, analyze why Thor went west and why it was okay, or was it okay for the Mets to let him go?
Well, that's the thing. The Mets gave him a one-year qualifying offer that was worth $18.4 million, and the Angels actually, doubled that by $3 million. So it's 1 year, $21 million. I look, Syndergaard. I mean, for more money, you pitched exactly 2 innings in 2 years. I wouldn't turn that down either. But at the same time, his departure leaves a really gaping hole in the Mets rotation. Right now, you got the Mets rotation. It's DeGrom, Taijuan Walker, and Carlos Carrasco, and all three have question marks. DeGrom, obviously, the elbow issues that sidelined him since July. Carrasco and Taijuan Walker showed their inconsistency. It makes things like maybe trying to resign Marcus Stroman all the more important, and then whether or not can the Mets add to the rotation. Justin Verlander's off the table as he re-signed a 1-year deal with the Houston Astros this afternoon. So, I mean, you look at things like maybe should they make a big pitch to Max Scherzer and see if he wants to come pitch in Citi Field. I mean, the familiarity with the National League East will probably be one intriguing thing. But the Mets right now, they have a lot of question marks. And in the case of Syndergaard, he's a question mark himself. I mean, had he returned to the Mets, it would have given them at least maybe one, sure starter that they could probably rely on, maybe towards the back end of the rotation. But going west, going to the Angels. And by the way, he's leaving one 77-85 team to join another 77-85 teams. That's one thing the Mets and Angels have in common. It's identical, identical sub 500 records. But in Syndergaard's case, he's going to a team that, for whatever reason, has never been able to solve his pitching woes, despite having the Otanis and Mike Trouts of the world on the roster. And that's kind of been their downfall. I mean, they can score runs, they just can't stop anybody else from scoring. And you look at the Mets right now, they get a compensation pick because he declined a qualifying offer. And the Mets farm system has been kind of bare in recent years. That gives them something to work with moving forward. But right now, in the immediate future, if you look at the Mets, you got to really figure out what exactly you're going to do with your rotation. I mean, the back end, you had David Peterson, you had Tyler McGee at one point. Can you trade for another starter? There are some guys that are out there that you sign for a 1-year deal. But the Mets have a lot of question marks right now, and that's something that the front office, including the new GM, is going to have to figure out.
Let's actually look at it this way also. They had a pitcher that they drafted that they couldn't sign last year with the 11th pick, which is why they're going to get to pick 11th and 14th again in this draft. I want to go back to the Syndergaard thing for a second. It's kind of interesting because all the talk was he wanted to stay in New York. He was easily going to take the qualifying offer. I blame his agent for not really feeling, because I think Thor thought he was in a back-end situation when you get 1 year, $18.4 million. you jump for joy. But then I think he looked at it a different way, as he said, and he said in a Twitter post today. He didn't realize how free agency was going to be. Saw the higher offer, but it wasn't about money, I think, before. I think it was about the fact that he thought, why continue a string in New York where, yes, he was going to be loved by the fans, but everything was going to be scrutinized to a T. The Angels are priority number 6 in Los Angeles. They are not high on the food chain. And so this, I think, it doesn't look good that you didn't give the Mets a chance to match, but I think for this situation, this is the right call for Thor's career. It may not be it may not work for a Met fan who might call this betrayal, but I think for Noah Syndergaard, I think getting a fresh start will be a help for his career. Look what it did with Zach Wheeler. He got the big contract and he started performing in Philadelphia after a lot of stops and starts with the New York Mets.
Yeah,
so maybe
yeah.
I'll help him.
I'm not one of those Met fans who see this as betrayal. I look at this as a business standpoint. Like, you got an extra $3 million. You get to go west. He's going to get a fresh start. So maybe it's the best thing for him. But for the Mets, it does leave a kind of a gaping hole in an already questionable rotation. They do get the draft compensation for it, but you know, like I said, it's a business. I mean, what can you say? I mean, but for extra $3 million, and considering Syndergaard has not pitched really a full outing in 2 years, so that is, I mean, that's a big haul. That's a good haul for a guy who's only pitched a total of 6 outs, if you want to call it that.
You guys know who's loving this, right? The guy who's loving this deal the most is Marcus Stroman. He's sitting back there on his couch, just laughing his ass off because he knows his own price tag just went up.
And if you think $22 million is a little too much for Noah Syndergaard, just remember he's 11 years younger than Justin Verlander, who's had about the same amount of pitches over the last 2 years.
Back to Houston.
And he got $25 million for that. So pitching is upside is still a thing. All right.
Well, Anthony, you know, you can take solace on this, as Marcus Stroman has once again said even though he's a free agent and even though he has, you know, he wouldn't mind staying in New York. He's not going to put the
it's not the Yankees.
He's not coming to the Bronx
painfully known
New York.
That he would
not. He's never coming to
He is still holding that grudge.
Let's move on, and that's not happening anytime soon, guys. Breaking news: the Jets are still terrible. After former savior Mike White's win, and that lasted about as long as the Linsanity era, over the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 8, that savior got injured in Week 9 versus Indy and never got back in the game as the Colts rolled gangrene. And then the Bills reminded the Jets why the division is called the Bills, the Pats, and everyone else in a 45-17, much worse than the score looks. Thanks for the memories, White Lotus. We'll remember everything for the future. This week, the Jets take on that other portion of everyone else, the Dolphins, starting Joe Flacco as their quarterback. If you thought Tua was the worst quarterback in this matchup, think again. Jay, the Jets, as I mentioned, still terrible, but find the positive from Week 9.
This is the second show in a row, guys, where I have really struggled to find a positive takeaway from a really bad performance. The last time was in the wake of the whoop ass that the Patriots opened up on them. The only sliver of a silver lining, say that 5 times fast, I could find was the continued development of rookie running back Michael Carter. Scored his 4th rushing touchdown, and he keeps showing how much of a dynamic factor he can be in both the run and pass games. And the Jets should continue to figure out a way to get him the damn ball, if I may paraphrase Keyshawn. Jets never could get the ground game going. Carter only had 39 yards on 16 carries. That's 2.4 a tote. But since they had to pass so much, Carter got 6 targets, caught 4 of them for 43 yards. He leads the team in rushing obviously, is tied for tops in receptions with Jamison Crowder. Both have 31, and he's second in receiving yards with 306 behind Corey Davis. He's on a pace for over 1,200 yards from scrimmage, which, considering the Jets' struggles with offensive line and quarterback play, hell, as Rabbi said, Joe Flacco, of all people, is starting on Sunday. It's pretty impressive and should continue to give the Jets some hope for the future that they have a reliable playmaker at the number one running back spot. Mike LaFleur should keep finding ways to get the ball into Carter's hands, as he's shown that he can make an impact on the ground as well as through the air. And honestly, guys, that's really the only bright spot I could find, because everything else, top to bottom, stem to stern, was a colossal Charlie Foxtrot, to use the military terminology.
I don't know. I can't say anything. At least Carter is convinced.
Let him find the negative.
Yeah,
he's got a lot.
That's coming. Anthony, the Jets fans needed to realize that Zach Wilson isn't going away, and I'm sure
I'm ready
of that.
to do a seance right now for the white era.
I know. It's kind of sad, but find that negative find that negative that needs to go away, other than firing the whole team and putting new people in their spots.
You know what? I was there when the Mike White era started officially a few weeks ago, and it officially died a slow, very painful death at the hands of the Buffalo Bills. Look, the Bills are the number one scoring defense in the NFL for a reason, and they don't give up a lot of passing yards. So you knew it was going to be somewhat of an uphill climb for a Jet team that really didn't do a whole lot offensively in recent weeks outside of Mike White's performance. It got worse. It was pretty bad. 224 yards on 44 attempts and 4 interceptions. And 3 of those interceptions didn't even look like – it looked like Mike White looked absolutely fooled. I think what happened is Mike White had a welcome to the NFL moment. And he's been in the league a couple of years, but he hadn't really played. And he kind of ran his mouth off a little bit about how he should have been the top pick in the draft the same year that Sam Darnold was drafted. And welcome to the NFL. 4 interceptions, 3 of them didn't even look like he's seen defenses that I'm quite sure didn't see on a game film leading up into that game, because there were 2 that were just atrocious. It's clearly obvious he didn't see a Bill defender in front of him, and the third one, he just completely airmailed and sailed over. It was a really bad performance. That the only person that won in all of this was Zach Wilson. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that there was no quarterback controversy in New York, and now is the Joe Flacco era, which was the era that closed last season, or was it the year before? I'm not sure. I think I've lost count of how many guys are sitting up for the Jets at quarterback at this point. I'm just gonna, at this point, it was a nice story. You know, his parents were there. But the Jets at this point really just need to get the season to be over right now. Like, at this point, it's just tank, get a high draft pick. We know Robert Saleh was not going to turn this team around overnight. It is too much baggage to get rid of over the last few years left over from the previous Adam Gates regime. Let's just get the season over.
This team doesn't need to tank. They're going to possibly have 2 top 10 picks because they got the miracle of Seattle sucking. So they're probably getting a pick at least 1 through 5. They're going to have 2 picks in the top 15 at least. So tanking, by the way, not an option. They need wings to build for next year.
By the way, guys, we didn't have a show last week. White on black Jet fans, absolutely horrible combination choice. I'm sorry. That was a terrible uniform combo.
Guys, I'm going to remind you of what I said on our 2 weeks ago on our mid.
We all said this, Jay. No one said the Mike White era is going in.
Just hang on.
I knew you were going to do this, but go right ahead.
I think it bears repeating because I need all the Jets fans to hear this again. And this is why Jet fans annoy me, okay? There is a reason this guy was listed as the 6th best quarterback in that draft class in 2018, okay? Overall, White has clunky feet, needs to stay in rhythm, balanced when dealing with pressure, but he checks the boxes with size, arm strength, and passing instincts to be an NFL backup. All right? People need this. And I clearly said, and nobody listened, and especially not Mike White. We all knew the minute there was enough film on this guy around the league, the reasons he has not really been able to get on the field since getting drafted would get exposed. They got exposed. You know, I'm sorry, Robert Saleh saying all the right things because he wanted to give White the confidence because you knew he was going to start the next game. We can now get real. The Zach Wilson experience will now resume once he's cleared because we know Flacco's just a stopgap for this Sunday. Wilson will be back, and the Jets can go back to their business of developing this guy. Maybe he learned a few things by having by sitting and watching for a few weeks that maybe will improve his play, if not this season, down the line. But any of y'all Jets fans who thought Mike White was your savior at quarterback, go crawl back under your rock and try and learn a few things about football.
It's called being hopeful, Jay, because of how bad Zach Wilson.
There's hopeful.
You don't understand. When your team doesn't win, you can't be patient.
There's hopeful and then there's delusional, Rabbi.
Yes,
everybody.
Delusional. I understand that completely. They're wrong, but they can be delusional. Okay, so very quickly, it's an insignificant game on Sunday because there's 12 teams in the AFC that are over 500, and 2 of them that are not are the Dolphins and the Jets. So you know what those games mean. But it's interesting to see what happens with Tua Tagovailoa. He still has a fracture in the middle finger of his left hand. Played last week, but did not start. But ended up playing most of the second half and was one of the factors that led to an upset of Baltimore. 8 of 18, going 8 of 13 for 158 yards. Scored a touchdown late on a 1-yard rush. Jacoby Brissett is a career backup, isn't good enough for government work backup, but these next 7-8 games for Tua are going to be huge because this is Tua's first full healthy season in the NFL. This is the first season that he actually started out with a clean slate, but the pressure has been on him because of what Ryan Fitzpatrick did last year to basically get this team on the precipice of the playoffs and then giving the keys to Tua right in the middle of the season. Not the way to do it. And now Tua can't go 5 miles. Luckily, the trade deadline is passed without hearing the name Deshaun Watson on his back. These next few weeks are going to be huge, starting with this game. And he plays the Jets again. So this might be a big help for Tua because we need to figure out what Tua is for the Dolphins. I think Tua's going to start next year in the NFL. But the question is where? Because we have a quarterback problem in the NFL. There is a lot of substandard play at the position, and you're going to take a young guy who has a lot of upside to him. Hopefully, Dolphin fans can see that the lingering Deshaun Watson, that signal is also coming with a suspension, so maybe you don't want that. Maybe you need to look at what you have right now. Tua is mobile. Tua can do a bunch of different things, and maybe he could just play a half of every game from now on because it seems like that's when he's the best for whatever team he plays for. Alabama in the first half and letting Ryan Fitzpatrick close last year and then, of course, last year. So we'll see what happens. That's going to be a very intriguing game. But again, the Dolphins are going up against Joe Flacco. Their defense has been phenomenal. And Anthony, you've seen it. We've mentioned it a bunch of times. The Dolphins are a very good second half team because Brian Flores does not allow this team to lose when they are in position to lose. He gets the most out of his guys, and I think we're going to see a very motivated Dolphins team the rest of the way. All right.
I mean, Rabbi, this is what intrigues me about too, is that it seems like he has games that are either really, really good or games that are like really, really bad. He's had
it's not even really, really good, Jay. It's just hang
on. He's had 3 games where he's had a passer rating of 95 or better. So that's 3 really good performances. And he's had 3 games where he's had very middling results. So that's the confusion where you don't know what you're actually going to get from him from week to week. And it's kind of why, you know, I love that phrase you use when you talk about, you know, just the baseline of NFL quarterbacks, whether a guy is good enough for government work. And it's such a great term to describe somebody like a Jacoby Brissett, because even though he's not great, you're basically going to get the same outing from him every single time he goes out there. With Tua, you get highs and you get lows, and you just got to wonder, do the Dolphins think that like they can kind of move him where the highs can outweigh enough of the lows to make him a better quarterback than just good enough for government work like Brissett is? It's going to be interesting.
But the problem is, unlike Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow from that draft, the highs are high, and Tua's high is kind of like over here. So the question, that high needs to be in a position. And again, for some reason, the Dolphins are tremendously impatient. All right. Hey, guys, good news. The New York Giants are 1.5 games out of the 7th spot. Talk about how mediocre the NFC is. After and here's an understatement, underwhelming 3-6 start to the regular season, the second half begins against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are coming off a pair of disappointing losses with the bye sandwich in between them. The Jets get the Bills after a 9-6 loss. The Giants get the Kansas City Chiefs after they get demolished by the Titans, and now they get the Bucs coming off of a loss, which is the worst recipe against a good team, especially going into their place. Jay, on offense, health is a huge thing for the Giants coming out of the bye.
Yeah, that's really the big question for the Giants coming out of the bye, Rabbi, is the health of their playmakers. They've struggled to keep guys like Barkley, Shepard, Galladay, Slayton, and Toney all on the field at the same time. Barkley has only been on the field for 5 games, 4 and change, since he only played 6 snaps before getting hurt against Dallas. He's yet to put up any real numbers in the running game. 57 yards against Washington week 2 is his high game, but he was starting to make an impact in the passing game. 13 targets, 11 receptions for 117 yards and a TD in his last 2 full games before getting hurt. His return adds a dynamic piece to the offense. Sterling Shepard, Daniel Jones's favorite wide receivers, also only played 5 games due to injury. He's really played only 3 full games if you base it on games where his snap percentage was over 90, and was his usual impactful self in those games. 26 catches, 283 yards, and a touchdown. Shepard moves the chains. He's the guy Jones goes to when he needs a first down, so his return is huge for Jones specifically and the offense overall. Kenny Galladay has only played 4 full games out of the 6 he's played in. Made a decent impact in those games, 17 catches on 26 targets, 282 yards. That's 16.6 per catch. No scores, though. His presence on the field as the number 1 wideout does force defensive coordinators to know where he is, which opens up the underneath in the middle for Shepard and the intermediate and deep for guys like Toney and Slayton. Speaking of those 2 gents, Toney's had 1 big game in that loss to Dallas, 10 catches, 189 yards, but he has struggled to get on the field due to some nagging injuries. And Slayton's only been healthy enough to play 6 games, but he's only made an impact in 3 of them. 6 catches, 119 yards, 19.8 per catch, and a TD in the first 2 games of the season. He missed weeks 4, 5, and 6, and then had 5 catches for 63 yards in week 7, and he's barely been used the last 2 games. Both Toney, with his ability to make plays in a variety of ways, and Slayton, with his ability to take the top off a secondary, give the Giants offense yet another pair of dimensions when they can get on the field. The Giants offense has struggled largely due to the guys they look to make plays, because those guys haven't been able to consistently stay healthy and thus consistently stay on the field. And their health really is the big question for the offense coming out of the bye.
And don't forget, Slayton has probably been the team's worst dropper of passes this season, and that's one of the reasons why he's not getting targeted anymore. It's going to be very interesting to see, especially if Toney can stay healthy, because the peak of Toney is not even close to what we thought it was going to be. It's that high that he can
his ceiling is higher than we thought it would be.
It's much huger, and then he could be a very good impact again. He just has to stay healthy, and Galladay is not really performing like a number 1 wide receiver when he's in there. So not worth what he's been paying for so far. Anthony, the defense are slowly rounding back into form. What do you want to see from them in week 11?
Well, can they keep it up? And that's pretty much what the whole thing is. Look, again, last season, the Giants finished in the top 10 in defense, and that was supposed to be the strength of this team. But it's clearly obvious that they struggled in the first half of the season, lost 2 key guys, Jabril Peppers and Blake Martinez, for the season. That clearly has not helped matters. But they look at how the Giants' defense was so good last year. They literally forced teams to be one-dimensional because they were so good at stopping the run. This year, they're 29th in stopping the run and 25th against the pass. I mean, it's a team that is 18th in points allowed on the year. But in the last 3 weeks, they've gone up to the 6th in the last 3 weeks, only giving up 13 a game. Part of it is the red zone defense gotten a lot better. They've been able to, you see like a high 10 offense like the Chiefs, and they're forcing to kick field goals rather than giving up touchdowns. Has it doing an awful lot, particularly towards the end of halves, within the first 5 or 6 games of the season. They've been able to kind of clamp down in the red zone. They definitely did that against the Raiders. By the way, watching the game at 1 a.m. is a whole new experience when it's live in another country. It's totally different. But
No
besides the point, the Giants defense has been able to really just kind of tighten things up, but more importantly, it simplified things a little bit. I think Patrick Graham was throwing in too many schemes when you have too many moving pieces. You had guys like a Dory Jackson that was new, that had not been around the team. Logan Ryan, remember, was picked up halfway through the season last year, so he didn't really play a full season with the team himself. So there was a lot of moving and shifting pieces, and I think the best thing was to simplify the schemes a little bit. Aziz Ojulari, that was a guy in the draft show. Remember, I thought the Jets should have picked up because they needed an outside pass rusher. He's been a great addition for the Giants. He leads the team in 5.5 sacks going into the second half of the season. The Giants really just need to keep going. It's going to be a big test next week because Tampa Bay leads the NFL in scoring, and they come off a really bad loss to Washington. Let's not pepper.
Let's not undersell that.
Yeah, let's not undersell it. That's all I want to say. They were bad against Washington, and that was a team without Chase Young. So the Giants really going to have to work cut out for them. Can they continue to limit teams to the offenses to field goals? Because that's really keeping the Giants in games as of late. Especially with an offense that is missing a lot of weapons. Daniel Jones have been inconsistent. Part of it not having his weapons, but also another half of it, he's been a little inconsistent with his play as well. And it's going to be look, the Giants are a game and a half out of the last wild card. I mean, you never thought that a Cowboy win would actually help the Giants out, but that happened over the weekend when they kind of beat the brakes off Atlanta. So the Giants are not actually out of it. I mean, they can get together some kind of a winning streak. It's going to have to do it on the defensive end that they may find themselves in the thicket of a playoff chase in a wide open NFC. After you get past the top 2 teams, it's pretty much wide open at that point.
Well, top 5 teams, because the division leaders and the Rams are still pretty good, although we haven't seen the best of the Rams over the last few weeks. The Rams pretty good. I mean, there's a difference between what we've seen with the Rams and what we've seen with the Panthers, who, by the way, are the team who the Giants are chasing after and have a head-to-head victory over. So keep that in mind. I'm very interested to see what the wide receiving core does. I have Chris Godwin as my pick, but you want to look at Chris Godwin and like Evans kind of as a two-headed monster. Godwin is 717 yards, 4 TDs. Evans is less with 606, but has 9 touchdowns. And the man lives to score touchdowns in the red zone because he's a physical nightmare. Godwin is the tall nightmare, which is why you could pass to him. Godwin has had 5 targets or more in every single game this season. There have been games when Evans has almost been visible on the field. He's only had double-digit targets 3 times. But one thing that is interesting to me with this, and that's all the stats I'm going to quote, because I'm going to ask myself this really weird question I thought to myself today. Tom Brady is probably, you have 2 of the best weapons that Brady has ever played for who are on the peak of their physical careers. The only person who might come close is Randy Moss the year they went 18-0. But Tom Brady is his best when his friends are on the field. Tom Brady loves throwing to Rob Gronkowski. Gronkowski was his best red zone target first 3 games of the season, and it doesn't seem like he's really connected too well with Cameron Brate or O.J. Howard since then. Antonio Brown did a ton of things for him and was probably his most reliable target and the guy who he targeted the most in the first 6 weeks of the season. you just don't. Brady almost depends on them a little too much, I think, and you're kind of seeing it now because Tom Brady is prone to making mistakes. He's 44 years old. He's not the best quarterback in the league. There are at least 3 or 4 that are better than him. And I think he is prone to making mistakes sometimes. The man is human. The only question is, can Tom coexist with the team that he has with him for this stretch run? Again, this is a good get-right game for Tampa Bay. As much as we love the Giants, this still seems like an overmatched situation. But I don't know how the future is going to be. You're not going to do. The only reason I don't think the Giants have too much of a chance here is one of the reasons Washington won that game is they put together a 10-minute and 30-second drive in the fourth quarter at the end of the game, something you don't really do too often to any team in the fourth quarter. And you still need a lot of stuff to beat Tampa Bay, but I don't know. And honestly, the question could go for the entire NFC. I know maybe people think Dallas has it all, but we just saw Dallas get killed by Denver. Who has the final formula to win the NFC? I don't think that question has been answered yet. And I think we're going to have to see that from Tampa Bay in order for them to defend the Super Bowl crown. Oh, we're moving on. Awesome. All right. So we're going to talk about 3 storylines overtaking the NFL in the last few weeks, and we start with the Carolina Panthers as they have begun the Cam Newton era once again. A November 11th signing of the Panthers legend, signing him to a 1-year deal, and his 2 subsequent TDs against Arizona just 3 days later have led to lots of people wondering about the future of the world's most outrageously dressed man. Sam Darnold? Joe Tafuro must be laughing at home. Think of the past. Even though he's rehabbing an injury right now, the Panthers are basically playing like he's not part of the organization anymore. Many people think Cam Newton has a chance to be the Carolina quarterback in 2022. It's back to the future, my friends. Anthony, jump in the DeLorean and tell us about Cam.
Well, look, it's a desperation move for a team that is really trying to stay in the thick of the playoff. As we mentioned, Carolina is right now sitting in that final wild card spot, thanks to Atlanta losing, and obviously they had a great win against an Arizona team that was missing starting quarterback and a star wide receiver. But nonetheless, Cam Newton, he gives the team a kind of a shot in the arm as far as bringing in some energy. And he is still very athletic, still a weapon with his legs. It's his arm that I'm not too crazy about. And I was at that Giants Patriots preseason game back in August, and I was not impressed with Cam Newton's arm strength. I feel like it reminds me of last year that he really had taken a step back as a passer. He's still very athletic and dangerous when he gets outside the pocket, but as a passer, he's completely regressed. You look at this team. Sam Darnold started out well. The turnover, and he was efficient as long as he kept the turnovers to a minimum. The turnover problems started coming back. Then he got hurt. PJ Walker clearly is not a long-term answer. So Cam Newton, obviously bringing Cam Newton bad luck. It's great to see that he's back with the Carolina Panthers. It's a great fit. It's a great marriage. Good to see him in the old Carolina blue and white, number 1 again. But the Carolinas they don't have a quarterback, and they don't have a long-term answer at quarterback. Donald was still on contract for next season. Who knows what's going to happen after this year anyway? But for the immediate future, it's great buzz. Like I said, Cam Newton has never been known as a negative person in the locker room. I mean, you always hear good things about Cam Newton's leadership and his camaraderie with the teammates inside the locker room. So I think that will help a younger ball club. But if you take away Cam Newton and force him in a pocket, I mean, what's going to happen then? I mean, you saw after he came back from COVID last year how his play greatly declined against New England. I think back to that Monday night game against the Jets where it was literally like a struggle to watch him complete anything over 10 yards for 4 quarters. I'm not quite sold on Cam Newton in Carolina, like so many other national pundits are right now. I think it's a great story, but I don't think it's going to be a long-term answer. And I can see Carolina, kind of fading down the stretch because of the lack of anything at quarterback right now.
Jay?
What I'm looking at is how he's gonna fit, with this offense. How will head coach Matt Rule and offense coordinator Joe Brady marry Cam's skill set? He's better as a runner than a passer, with the current offensive scheme to create the best possibilities for success. We know what Newton brings to the locker room. Anthony just talked about it in terms of his leadership and energy, and has scoring a rushing TD and a passing TD in his first 2 offensive snaps in the limited package they ran for him in last Sunday's win over Arizona. Showcased those intangibles and that skill set, and gave a glimpse of what he can still do on the field. This is still going to be a lab experiment, very similar to what Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels tried to do with Newton in New England last year. The experiment over the 15 games that Newton started produced a completion percentage of 65.8 for 2,657 yards, 7.2 yards per attempt, but more interceptions, 10, than touchdowns, 8. But here's how the quarterback play bar is in Charlotte. This is how low it is since Sam Darnold imploded. On expected points added per play basis, last year's version of Newton was actually better than this year's version of Darnold. Again, the bar is low. Though with DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Christian McCaffrey, Newton has much better playmakers here than he did last season with the Patriots. However, Newton did show that he's still a factor in the run game, and Rule does want to run the ball more. Cam carried 137 times for 592 yards, 4.3 a carry, 12 rushing touchdowns. Among the 51 players who had at least 100 rushing attempts last season, Newton ranked second in success rate. He ran for 55 first downs, which was just 1 fewer than Lamar Jackson, who we all know can make a play or 2 with his legs, right? Carolina's offensive line ranks 27th in team pass block win rate at 51%. So it'll be interesting to see if Rule and Brady incorporate more RPOs into the passing game to take advantage of Newton's mobility and to mitigate the O-line's glaring issues in pass blocking. Newton can give the Panthers a chance to win with their top 5 defense by simply avoiding the negative plays Sam Darnold kept making for an offense that ranked 31st in expected points added per game through week 9. Look, we all know what Newton is. He's Carolina's all-time leader in passing, over 29,000 yards through the air, 182 passing touchdowns. He's number 3 on their career rushing list, 4,806 yards and 58 TDs on the ground. But he's also a larger-than-life figure, a former NFL MVP who took this team to a Super Bowl and was the face of the franchise for 9 years. The remaining schedule is the second toughest in the NFL. But if Rule and Brady can find a way to maximize Newton's skill set, work within the framework of the offense, Newton's intangibles can energize the team and in the locker room, and the defense continues their high-level play, the Panthers may have a shot at being the final NFC wildcard team, which, if the season ended today, is what they would be.
And I'm looking at the schedule now, ironically, not just because you said it. The next 3 games are winnable: Washington, Miami, and Atlanta, but then Buffalo, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Tampa Bay. That's a little bit of a problem. Also a problem is the Panthers are now currently paying Cam Newton, the person who originally paid replaced Cam Newton. Remember, they're still on hook for Teddy Bridgewater, most of Teddy Bridgewater's contract this year, right? And the person that replaced Teddy Bridgewater, and now the person that replaced Sam Darnold. So, Jay said it perfectly, and I just look at it this way. Look at the 1 week of Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson went from yelling at Sam Darnold on the sidelines 1 week to basically becoming Cam Newton's clone in a press conference the week after. I think Cam Newton's going to make this team just have an energy to it. And again, one thing that helped out Sam in his early part of the season is he had Christian McCaffrey to run the offense through, and there's nobody better in the NFL to do that. So I think that's going to be a huge factor. McCaffrey can almost be good for 200 all-purpose yards almost every single game. I think he had 180 versus the Cardinals in that upset last week, although I think Colt McCoy might have had a little something to do with it too, and the loss of all the weapons for Arizona. But there's no one like Cam in the National Football League. That's pretty obvious. I'm not a big fan of yelling out "I'm back" after scoring on a 1-yard play that was specifically ran for you that almost anybody could have done in the NFL, but you gotta like the confidence of him. And he's going, the fact that he left is just, he never fit in New England for me. He is always a Carolina Panther, and I know Matt Rule and Joe Brady are not going to be someone who is always, they're always going to be passed first. Let's be honest. I think they can make this work. I think they can make this work because of who they have in the backfield and McCaffrey to make this a running team.
Yeah, maybe, Rabbi, but here's the thing. As much as, they may be passed first and they brought in Darnold because they wanted to pass the ball more, Rule is very much a disciple of Bill Parcells, and that is, and the strategy he takes from that is he actually does want to run the ball more. He is looking to increase the amount of plays that they run. He wants to step back from being so pass heavy, and Newton essentially gives them that option. So it will be interesting to see how, if they can find a happy medium, because while Rule may want to run more, we know that Brady is a pass guy from his background at LSU. So it'll be interesting to see how they all come together and find a happy medium in that scheme, and if it produces enough success to pair with this top 5 defense.
Yeah, and by the way, yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off, but McCaffrey's a great weapon. Go ahead. Yeah, McCaffrey's a great weapon, but he's got to stay on the field. I think that's the key thing. I mean, he's been banged and nicked up a lot the last couple of years. He has to stay if he's on the field, he's a dangerous weapon and a great asset to have for Carolina's offense, but that's just the thing. He's got to stay healthy.
Yeah, and if he can, he forces defensive coordinators to account for him everywhere and every time. So that trickles down, and it may improve opportunities to get the ball downfield to guys like Robbie Anderson.
What you basically said, though, about becoming a more run-heavy team is the problem is McCaffrey is almost as good just using him in every single way. Like, he's almost half as valuable as a pass catcher and half as valuable as a runner. And Chuba Hubbard, nice story, did a decent job, but he's not ready to kind of take a 15 back. He's not ready to be a back.
Rabbi, I think, to me, the desire to run more, I don't think that's going to increase the number of carries McCaffrey gets. I think it will be because they can run more design runs out of the quarterback spot with Newton to kind of give them that extra amount of plays they want to utilize in the running game. That's what's going to make it.
Like I said, we're going to see what happens, because Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Tampa Bay to end the season. That's about as bad as you can get, because New Orleans is a very good defensive team, and we've seen what Tampa Bay has done. All right, let's talk about everyone's favorite subject, Odell Beckham Jr. Once a Brown, always underwhelming. The Cleveland Odell era ended a couple of weeks ago with the outright release and not picked up on waivers of one of the league's former top receivers. Now, the remains of his game have been taken to the LA Rams, who immediately saw their number 2 option, Robert Woods, tear his ACL the day after. And OBJ, team player, had a 2-catch, 17-yard day and did what he does when he is normally in an NFL game where they're trying to get the ball to him: lose. Anthony, we love OBJ on this show. What are your thoughts as OBJ is now in LaLa Land?
You know what? For me, it's a last shot at redemption, and I feel like a lot of advocates for Odell Beckham is still holding on to what he was doing with the Giants his first few years in the league. I have his numbers for his first 3 years: 1,305, 1,450, and 1,367. Those are his receiving yards his first 3 years of his career. Keep in mind, he only played 12 games his rookie season, and still managed to put up those numbers. So Odell is still a dynamic wide receiver, but I don't think he's that. I don't think he's that guy that people saw with the Giants anymore. I mean, I think he's more of a receiver who should be more running, like who can make a big play, but he needs to run more intermediate routes, and I think kind of run the not always look for the big play. I think about Randy Moss. Randy Moss is somebody that was dynamic and always a big play waiting to happen, what made it more dangerous when he started running those 10, 15-yard routes over the middle and was getting more involved in the offense and not just run the 30 yards downfield, I throw it up to you. But some of it is also Odell Beckham too. I mean, a lot of blame is put on Baker Mayfield, the offense not getting the ball. But when you watch plays like a couple of weeks ago against the Steelers, where he barely even tried to go up for a pass that was for him over the middle in a crucial point in the game, or even this past Monday night in San Francisco, where he stopped on his route, which led to that interception because clearly, Matt Stafford thought he was going to continue running downfield. Those are plays that you look at on film and you think, okay, that's on OBJ. So it's like, look, he's going to have to change the attitude a little bit and realize that he's not going to get the ball maybe every time, but he needs to run his routes. He needs to actually continue on running downfield or continue running through a zone or whatever the case may be, because that does help the rest of the play go along. And I always thought that was one thing that Odell Beckham to himself kind of was a detriment. But when you look at the big picture, and this is and Robert Woods going down with the unfortunate season injury, kind of opened things up for Odell Beckham to kind of reinsert himself. The problem is Odell Beckham has kind of burned two bridges now. So now this is his third team in his career, in a very short career, mind you. He's still not even 30 yet. And you just got to wonder, I mean, how many more chances is he going to get to be that guy, that sure Hall of Famer that a lot of people thought he was going to be when he was with the Giants? You think about this, if he wasn't happy with a future Hall of Fame quarterback, Eli Manning, if he wasn't happy with a guy he was friends with Baker Mayfield, how quickly is he going to be happy with a guy in Matt Stafford, whose whole reputation, even when he was with Calvin Johnson, was spreading the ball around over the field regardless of who was there. And a lot of people, and look, I saw people kind of jumping down Troy Aikman's neck about, his criticism, saying that Stafford may be compelled to force feed Odell Beckham to kind of keep him quiet. But if you're a Giant fan like myself and you watch Eli Manning throw some interceptions because he was trying to force Odell Beckham into the game a little bit, it's not too far-fetched, because it's like, look, when you have those dominant personalities, particularly at wide receiver, and you feel the need to kind of get them involved, things happen. And we saw with Matt Stafford, the moment he tried to get Odell Beckham involved, who's only been on the team for 3 days, bad things happen. He threw an interception. So I think Odell Beckham is going to have to just basically go with the flow of the offense and take advantage of opportunities when they come to him. And he's going to have to change his whole attitude as well. I mean, you got to realize you're going to a team.
By the way, let me cut you off there for a second. Yes, there was an interception that he force-feeded on them, but Odell Beckham was targeted 3 times on Monday. So let's not say that's that. That's clearly a discourse or something wrong with Stafford right now than anything else. I mean, yes, Beckham is still a selfish person, but still,
I don't know if I find that.
I think I just think he might have a little bit of an injury, because what we've seen those last 2 weeks are not what we saw.
I'm not gonna put the whole Monday night. I'm not gonna put all Odell Beckham because he only played the 22 snaps. So I mean, he was on the team for like 3 days before he practiced and got to travel with the team. But on the interception itself, he slowed up on his route, and that's the thing that concerns me, because that's something that stands out, and that's an OBJ problem that he needs to fix without question.
All right, let's the Beckham. He deserves all of this bad. Okay, let's go on.
Here's the thing. There was a really great article that was published in The Athletic right at the time where Browns coach Kevin Stefanski made the declaration that Odell Beckham Jr. is no longer a member of this team, about how Beckham is the guy all of this stuff happens and the bill never comes due for him. So it'll be interesting to see if there does come a point, as Anthony said, where that does happen. Like with Cam Newton, guys, I'm looking to see how he fits into this scheme. I mean, on paper, when you take the Rams' explosive play rate, they lead the NFL at 18.5%, according to True Media Stats. And you pair it with Beckham's ability to create those type of plays downfield, as well as his nearly 50% contested catch rate, this would seem to be a great match of wide receiver, quarterback, and offensive scheme. And the acquisition is now seemingly fortuitous, as Rabbi said at the top, with Robert Woods losing, being lost for the season due to that ACL injury in practice last week. But I wonder if the juice is actually worth the squeeze when the numbers clearly show that the Browns were a much better offense without Beckham than they were with him. Granted, there are numbers that indicate that Beckham and Baker Mayfield struggled to create the type of connection a quarterback and his number one wide receiver need for a passing game to be successful in the NFL. Just 64.9% of Mayfield's throws to Beckham over the last 3 years were on target. For some context and comparison, over those same last 3 seasons, there have been 92 instances of a quarterback targeting a receiver at least 100 times. Among those 92, Mayfield's on-target percentage on throws to Beckham ranked 90th. So the case can be made that Beckham will be more productive with Matthew Stafford as his quarterback. The flip side of those numbers are these, guys. Beckham played 29 games in those 3 seasons with the Browns, catching 114 balls for 1,586 yards. He's one of 99 wide receivers who have run at least 500 routes since the start of 2019. During that time, Beckham ranked as follows in the following categories: 43rd in yards per game at 54.7, 33rd in yards per reception at 13.9, 90th in catch percentage at 54.3, 43rd in yards per route run at 1.72. By those and practically any other statistical measure, he was a mediocre at best starting wide receiver during his time with the Browns. The Browns' offensive numbers with and without Beckham are an example of extremes. With Beckham, when he's been on the field over these last 3 seasons, the Browns have produced minus 1.8 expected points added per 100 snaps. That translates into roughly the 20th ranked offense in the NFL. Without Beckham on the field, they produced 4.7 expected points added per 100 snaps. That translates to roughly the 8th ranked offense in the NFL. Look, I am sure that Sean McVay thinks he can make this work. But as Anthony alluded to, there is a very believable scenario where he struggles to incorporate Beckham into the offense. Stafford unnecessarily forces throws his way, something it kind of looked like he did on that first interception in last week's loss to the 49ers, and something that it seemed like Mayfield did often, and the offense ends up taking a step back. The upside could be big. And with Woods out, Beckham should get those targets once he acclimates to the Rams offense. We all know Cooper Kupp is going to stay wide receiver 1, but Beckham could very easily slide into Woods' slot as wide receiver 2. But based on his history in Cleveland, it is by no means a sure thing, guys, that we're going to see the version of OBJ that had a per 16 game average of 107 catches, 1,534 yards, and 13 TDs over his first 3 seasons as a Giant.
I think those first 3 seasons as a Giant can almost be thrown out the window now because it's so much later than that. And he's had so many injuries since that. Odell Beckham, you can't just whoever leaked the video of his father posting on Instagram, if Odell said, "Could you just post this for me?" Whatever he did, he wanted to get himself out of Cleveland and got rewarded by going.
He Le'Veon Bell his way out of there.
He said, "What's happened to Le'Veon Bell? He's a guy for you." No, this is just, I don't like the fact that he basically forced himself to go to the Rams. As much as I love what the Rams have done this year, Jay, they were your Super Bowl pick and my Super Bowl pick. What they look like right now on the field, and OBJ kind of represents it. I've seen in the Tennessee game, watched the whole San Francisco game on Monday. It was said by Louis Riddick on the broadcast very easily. This is a team. This is individuals, an all-star team playing right now as individuals, and they need to come together as a team. And if you have Odell Beckham on your roster, I think a guy who is one of the only wide receivers in the league that looks for his targets first and then will adjust later to hopefully get the catch. I don't like the way this is going for the Los Angeles Rams. I don't like Odell Beckham Jr. as a player. I think he is, exactly as Jay said, the numbers stated, he is a mediocre wide receiver and is an even worse teammate. And I think we're about to find that out now. A guy like Van Jefferson would have been perfect as the number 2 option on this team. Tyler Higbee is a very good tight end. He would have been perfect as the number 3 option. They have Darrell Henderson at running back. Sean McVay's system works as long as Stafford is able to execute it to the best of his ability. And having somebody like OBJ, who is just a walking headline in your locker room, is not going to work when you want to win a Super Bowl. And I don't think OBJ's first choice is, I want to win.
Yeah, and Rabbi, the only thing to me where I can see him not being a cancer in the locker room is because you look at the leadership on that team. You look at Aaron Donald, you look at Jalen Ramsey. Von Miller, even though he doesn't have to be a leader, comes in with all of that on his resume, having been a locker room leader for his entire career. Even Stafford, I mean, he's an established quarterback. He has that cred. They may be enough. And, you know, this could just be a honeymoon period where Beckham says all the right things, doesn't create any waves because he thinks he has a chance to at least get to a Super Bowl with this team. If he plays like that and he acts like that, then he won't become a distraction. He won't be the walking headline that that he has been in his career, as you said. My concern is if the Rams offense continues to struggle, if he starts making waves either aggressively or passive aggressively about not getting enough targets, that to me is where things will implode. And if there's any one guy on this team who, based on his attitude and lack of work ethic and selfishness, can bring this team's Super Bowl hopes down, it's him. To me, they're walking on the razor's edge with this acquisition.
Absolutely. I'm
done.
I'm done too. Now on to a topic that's not going to alienate anybody. Aaron Rodgers, who 5 days ahead of a showdown against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, got shut down due to testing positive for COVID. It was only after that we found out he had a 10-day minimum quarantine. And you only have a 10-day minimum quarantine if you're unvaccinated. So we found that out despite saying he was immunized when asked in the preseason. Furthermore, like having an ace against the dealer in blackjack, A-Rod doubled down and defended his decision not to be vaxxed, evoking historical figures from the likes of Martin Luther King Jr. to Dr. Joe Rogan in a bizarre interview that Friday on Pat McAfee's podcast. All right, Jay. I read in the rundown for this show, it just said text rant. So yes. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we were off the week this actually went down. So the only place I could rant about this was on the group chat that I have with these two fine gentlemen. I'm just gonna redo it here because my feelings haven't changed, and you all should get to bear witness to this as well. So when there was an article published in The Athletic about this, and when I read the article after it broke, that not only had Rodgers violated COVID protocols, but was not vaccinated. Immunized is not vaccinated, Mr. Rodgers. As he implied, I said to you guys that, quote, it's official, Aaron Rodgers is now one of those guys. There was a whole section in that article about the vaccines and why he didn't take either of the three options. And he could have told everyone that from the outset, and it would have been fine. We may not have agreed with him, but it would have been fine, and this would not be a story. But no, he had to lie about it. And let's be clear, he flat out lied about it, okay? Keep this in mind, though. Whether you disclose your vaccination status or not, the beat writers will figure it out based on certain things they see a player doing or don't see him doing from being around the team every day. It's not hard to determine after a while, but the minute you start spouting off the type of things that Rodgers did when you're busted and called out on it, you lose all credibility. One sponsor already dropped him, and if you guys will notice, Allstate has stopped showing his commercials. Rabbi
That's
said
State Farm, by the way. I wish all states may.
Right.
They had this Aaron Rodgers middle name though, so
Yeah, that's right. So Rabbi said to me, he said, like, well, we don't have a right to know, and he's correct. And that's true. We don't have a right to know Rodgers' vaccination status. Fans don't have the right to know. The media doesn't have the right to know. Not really. His employers do have a right to know, in which the rabbi told me they did, which makes that organization complicit. And shame on you, Green Bay. My problem is Rodgers lied about it. And when he got busted, he went off the rails, blaming everyone and everything else instead of taking responsibility for his own choices. You hear NFL players and coaches talk all the time about accountability, holding each other and themselves accountable. Well, I guess if you're Aaron Rodgers, that only applies to what you do on the field. Apparently, when it comes to what you do off the field, accountability goes out the window.
I look at it like this. Okay, 3 days. Number one, Aaron Rodgers brought all this to himself. He brought all this onto himself. I mean, that is painfully obvious. I mean, it's one thing to lie, but to double down the way he did. I mean, I have no sympathy for Aaron Rodgers whatsoever. That's number one. Number two, if you're going to bring 500 pages of research to the National Football League, make sure that you can cite at least 5 of those from an actual physician and not Joe Rogan or some wackadoo doctor who, by the way, tested positive for COVID this afternoon. In his own right. That's number two. And number three, I'm quite sure Shailene Woodley is a very nice young lady. She's a great actress. But social media and loved ones do not mix. It's painfully obvious. I know she's being well, but keep her off social media. It does. Look, you've already dug a deep hole for yourself. Don't let your fiance bury you even further. Have we not criticized OBJ's dad for doing exactly that for him? Keep loved ones on social media. They don't look. They mean well, but it never goes well when they start spouting off on social media. Besides the point like this, and also look, shame on the NFL for not coming out harder. I mean, $12,000 fine is ridiculous when you realize guys have been fined more for a uniform violation than anything. I mean, guys,
just ask Sneed Lamb, baby.
Yeah, it's hilarious. That's one thing. And also, the Green Bay Packers. I mean, look, they have to be held accountable for this too, because keep in mind, Aaron Rodgers went a Halloween party, maskless, around his teammates. He was shown at the pressers with no mask on, pretty much knowing full well he was not vaccinated, but none of us thought of it because he lied the entire time. Look, Aaron Rodgers not his decision to not get vaccinated. That's his choice. I would rather he did his research by going to a physician, since he's a world-class athlete who has the luxury of going to world-class physicians, has a member of the National Football League, and a guy who is one of the top patients in the league. That's besides the point. And I would never understand why these free thinkers, as they call themselves, get their advice from anyone other than a licensed physician. At least make a decision after the fact. Look. I went to Howard University for 4 years for journalism. No one should ever come to me for child psychology ever. I don't have kids, and I don't recommend anybody to come to me for that. All right. Do not go to a comedian / UFC announcer for your medical advice. Nothing against Joe Rogan. He's not funny to me, but nothing personal. But go to a doctor. I don't understand this. Look,
it's understandable.
Look, make a decision after the fact, okay? But it blows my mind how these athletes, with their research, which is no more than a 35-minute Google search, suddenly think they're the smartest minds in the world. It's like, knock it off, all right? Just stop, okay? Look, I respect your decision. I mean, I agree with it. I respect it, but cut it out. You're not Will Smith, I Am Legend, all right? You're not going into a lab with an overcoat and looking into a microscope for 2 hours.
Right.
Let's stop, okay?
Let's get the train back on the tracks over here for a second. I'm not going to mention any science. I'm not going to mention any doctors. I understand the rants.
I was about to say, Rabbi, he outranted me, and it's rare that Anthony outrants me.
That is tremendously rare. I have a rant coming myself. No, not on this. Fair to say, Aaron Rodgers has kind of gotten a big head over the last few years. Just look at what's happened. Just look at the fact that he basically released his demands to be traded on draft night. Just look at the fact that the man thinks he's America's next game show host. Just look at the man who is just more in the tabloids in the offseason than it seems like he's in practice. And then, unfortunately, is just lying. Not even in the press conference, just during the season, holding it. And Jay, you're wrong. I said to addend that, you need to let the media of your own freaking team know, because they're in a room with you when you're doing a press conference. You need to let them know. We talked about that. That was my one addendum to that. But then you realize the fact that the reason why Green Bay hit this is because Aaron Rodgers is, again, it's the line of, do you respect the man or do you respect the player? They respect what the player has done this year. The player has done amazing again. Just look what he did in Arizona without his biggest weapon, Devontae Adams, basically going in shorthanded against Arizona. And then look at what Jordan Love did against Kansas City. And you realize that not only did Aaron Rodgers put his agenda out there, he got exactly what he wanted. You saw Jordan Love was on the big stage. And Jordan Love, even with a few days to prepare against a defense that had been maligned, and a team that you only needed 14 points to score against to win that day, Jordan Love did not look ready to play. And it just feeds into the ego of Aaron Rodgers. I don't think this is a woke situation. I think this is the situation of an arrogant nation. Let's move on. NBA. That's a thing that started almost a month ago. Let's focus on the locals of in this area. I wrote both are off to decent to very good starts, but I'm going to cross that off because of what happened tonight. And we'll talk about a team that yours truly also mentioned on our NBA preview show that's getting more shine. Anthony, the Nets are 10-5 so far, but good Lord to say they've been bottom feeders and beating the teams that they should beat and not beating the teams that they can get an effort to beat. Main takeaway from month one.
You know what? It's all on Kevin Durant. I mean, they're going to go as far as Kevin Durant as the Slim Reaper can actually carry them at this point. Look, no Kyrie Irving for the obvious.
Probably the season. Probably the season.
We know why he's not available. But James Harden has not played well. Not got into a great start neither. So all the shoulder is on Durant. And look, he is leading the league in scoring right now. He's averaging almost 30 a game at 29 points per game. And he's off to his most efficient start of his career. You think about this. He leads the league in scores per touches. And that's what 0.427% of the time he touches the ball, he scores. His mid-range game, he's scoring close to 60% in the mid-range game. Only Shaq in his last season with the Celtics was able to reach that point higher at any point. Kevin Durant, he makes it look so easy. I'm not gonna they got the bus beat by Golden State. Let's not take away from that. But I'm not gonna put that much on. Put the loss on Kevin Durant. He is doing everything possible to really keep this, keep the Nets afloat right now. They quietly had that winning streak going until Golden State came into Brooklyn. When Kevin Durant won offensive player, Eastern Conference Player of the Week, they were 3-1. He averaged over 30 points in that stretch. So he is doing his part. I mean, he's shooting a career high of 58%. Look at his career trend in year 14, whereas his assist numbers is going up. It's almost like his game has evolved to where now, even when he's taking what the defense is giving him, it is almost like he's one of the most efficient scorers I've ever seen. I always joke that he's a guy who will score 50, he only takes 15 shots because he's really that good. And not just how he scores, but the way he does it. He's just very efficient. He can get his shots at will, but more importantly, he can take over a game. And right now, if you take away his play the first month of the season, the Nets will be in really big trouble. They're 10-5 right now. They don't really have a lot of quality wins. They're taking care of the teams they have to beat. Cleveland, they beat tonight, but they're shorthanded. We kind of know the Cavaliers have a problem with injuries right now, despite their good record. But right now, Kevin Durant, he's the guy. I mean, this is what he wanted. He wanted his own team. He left Golden State. Now it is literally his team in Brooklyn right now because we don't know what James Harden is coming is giving him on a nightly basis because he's been inconsistent. And obviously, he's not getting those fouls called that he was getting years past. So that's been a bit of an issue right there. And he's also, because of the hamstring, he was playing himself back into the shape. So outside of Patty Mills, Kevin Durant hasn't really had a lot of secondary help in this first month of the year. So every day is on his shoulders. But right now, he's been playing lights out. I had on my notes that he's playing like the best player in the game. Not exactly. Steph Curry right now is like the best player in the game.
It's pretty even.
Put him at number 2 right now. I mean,
you can go one way or the other.
It's by default. It's by default. I'm sorry, okay? Steph Curry
it's understandable, but you can honestly go
in Brooklyn 24 hours ago.
We'll talk about the Warriors with Jay for a second. The first 2 wins of the season are actually looking really good. They beat Philly in a game Philly choked away in one of the only games they've had at beat fully healthy this season. And then that next Monday's win against Washington doesn't look too good. But then when you realize Washington is 10-3, and I hope they continue their success because that Russell Westbrook trade is, if it continues, is going to become the Herschel Walker trade of the NFL, of the NBA history the other way.
The Kuzma KCP show in Washington, baby.
Just look at one thing I'm going to say about that. In 2 years, the Wizards got John Wall, a person that they've been trying to get rid of for 2 years, for essentially all the depth that they have now, which is insane. Okay. Now let's talk about the Knicks, who dropped to 8-7 last night after their second loss in this season at home to the Magic. They're 3-5 at home this year. And there is a simple reason why. It's not just the defense. And yes, Julius Randle has struggled at times this season, but when he's taken over games, he has taken over games like he did in the first 3 quarters at Chicago a few weeks ago. Looked amazing. They were barraging 3-pointers to start the year, but then as you realize, if you barrage 3-pointers and you don't know how to shoot them all the time, you're going to miss most of your 3-pointers. And tonight they only went 18 of 49, and RJ Barrett went 0 of 7 from 3. So that high pace is now essentially coming back down to earth. This is a team that does not know how to play 4 quarters as well. Last 2 games, their first half has been really good. Most of the season, they were being outscored, I think, until the last week by 60 points in the second half. 60. And there have been quarters that have been awful from this team where it didn't look like they even showed up at all. I'm shocked this team is 8-7. But most importantly, and also, I'll mention the defense. In a league that has tightened up on defense everywhere, this defense has gotten worse because the people that they have on this lineup, they have no consistency from the 5 right now in the combination of Mitchell Robinson and Nerlens Noel. They've never really been healthy. Kemba Walker does not, and Evan Fournier do not know how to guard anybody. And the rest of the team is just a mediocre defensive team. And sometimes I feel like people have figured out Tibbs' system again, how to play against the system this year. But now the stat of the night. Here are the starters for this team. And remember, Kevin Walker and Evan Fournier in these last 2 games in the Garden have played a grand total of 0 minutes in the 4th quarter. Here are the starters. This is the combination of Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson. They are outscored by 19.1 possession points per 100 possessions before the game tonight. Now the reserves. Last year's 6th-man nominee Derrick Rose, Emmanuel Quigley, who looks better in his second season, Alec Burks, who's doing about as much as he did last year, Obi Toppin, who is making a leap, and Taj Gibson, who is the Thibodeau player. Like if Thibodeau went to a cloning school, that's who Thibodeau would make. 27.9 points per 100 possessions outscoring. You get a 47-point swing when you go from one lineup to the other lineup. It's early to say if Kemba Walker or Evan Fournier are failures in New York, but you're not passing the early test. And having that, despite RJ Barrett showing signs this year, despite Julius Randle at times looking like a beast, despite Emmanuel Quigley just really stepping up his game, despite Obi Toppin looking like a fifth pick, despite Derrick Rose at the same level that he was last year, this team can't get out of their own way. And yes, it's early in the season. We don't know how any team is right now. The Bucks are under 500. The Lakers are, as I would put them when I see them, hot garbage. I think this is just a long season, but what you've seen from the Knicks in the last 2 weeks is just not good and almost frightening.
Yeah, I gotta add to that. I mean, you look at it is amazing how night and day the starters for the Knicks play compared to the bench. You can make the argument the Knicks have the best bench in the league because the bench is the reason why there's so many games down the stretch.
Yes.
The defense, the intensity, everything is so like top notch with the bench, and the starters come out absolutely flat to start games. It is incredibly mind-boggling how topsy-turvy this Knicks team has been. I can't like believe the blowout win against Orlando is really the only time I remember this year where they played a consistent 4 quarters. Other than that, they either had to hold on for dear life late in games, or they had to fight their way and claw their way back into a game like they've done recently at home and try to win late down the stretch. I mean, and the defense is going in and out. I mean, particularly on fast breaks. They're not getting back. They're giving up a lot of fast break points to start the year. So the Knicks right now has been a model of inconsistency, if there's been one, for a team that is supposed to be on the rise in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys talk about it, and you guys watch this team, a little bit more than I do. And a couple of the things that like kind of jump out at me is like, I mean, you think about, we talked about it in the preview show for the NBA. We thought that Kemba Walker would bring, a starting point guard who had the ability to get into the paint and either score at the rim, draw fouls, or kick out. This is a guy who's averaging 1.5 free throws a game. He's averaging 2 assists. He's averaging 3 assists per game. Julius Randle's leading this team in assists at 5.1. So the things that, the counting stats, the things that, the surface things you look at that he was expected to improve upon, you're not seeing it. Evan Fournier was bought in to be a sniper from beyond the arc. He's shooting 35.6% from downtown on a little over 6 attempts per game. I mean, these are guys we expected to combine for about 30 to 35 points per game. They're barely averaging 25, and they're not shooting that well. Again, it's becoming a situation where this offense has devolved into Julius Randle, a little bit of RJ Barrett, and Derrick Rose when he comes into the game with, an assist from Quickly, with that bench backcourt. We're seeing the same patterns that we saw last year. The only difference, guys, is that last year, this team's defense was in the upper echelon of the NBA. And surprisingly, for a Tom Thibodeau coach team, this year, that defense has nosedived. Granted, Fournier and Walker are not considered high-level defensive players, but there are other guys on this team who are, and you just wonder where the disconnect is. And I don't know how soon or if it can be corrected. You're talking about veteran players and guys like Walker and Fournier, and at this point in their careers, they are who they are. It's rare that you see somebody make a mid-career or even towards the tail end of their career, have that type of renaissance that Rose had when he came here. We're seeing the young guys do some good things in the second unit. But these starters, and if you want me to find a single guy who you can compare it to, the starting 5 right now is Elfrid Payton. I mean, come on. The fact that these guys continually dig holes in the first and third quarters that the bench has to dig them out of, and the bench has dug them out of these holes and got them back into games, but then the starting 5 comes back in and they give it right back. So at some point, I wonder at what point does he get exasperated to the point where he tries to start doing things differently? I hope that doesn't mean moving Derrick Rose into the starting lineup, because as we saw, that has a trickle-down effect on the second unit, and when that unit is playing so well together, I'm loath to see him break that 5-man unit up. But something's got to give with the starting unit. It cannot be all Julius Randle with, a little bit of RJ Barrett. It can't be that. They're not going to improve on last year if that's what it is, if it stays that way.
Yeah, this is a very, very hot and cold team. And also one thing, you can't have a night off in the East this year. Every game is a dogfight. This is a much wider open East. Okay, Jay, we could talk about the Wizards who are 10-4, which is amazing. We could talk about the Bulls who are 10-4, which is also amazing considering the mishmash that they brought in free agency. But my God, the Golden State Warriors are the best team in the NBA. 12-2.
I gotta tell you,
I did not expect this, but this is a team that we wanted to watch, and my God, it is.
Right. I mean, Rabbi, I don't even think the most optimistic Warrior fans, I don't think even they can say they saw this start coming. 12-2, best record in the NBA. I mean, look at the numbers, guys. Number 1 in the NBA in points per game at 115.2. Number 3 in opponents' points per game at 101.6. Number 2 in offensive rating at 112.7. Number 1 in defensive rating at 99.5. Number 1 in net rating at plus 13.3. Number 1 in the NBA in rebounds at 48.6 per game. Steph Curry's putting up MVP numbers, 28.7 points per game, almost 41% from downtown on 13.4 attempts per game, 6+ rebounds, 6+ assists to go with the team leading 1.7 steals per game. Draymond Green is putting up Defensive Player of the Year numbers as the quarterback of that NBA leading defense that is allowing the 3rd lowest opponent's field goal percentage. And he's leading the team in rebounds and assists. Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole are both averaging more than 17 points per game as complementary scorers to Steph. And Wiggins has improved on the defensive end, which is saying something since he got some all-defense second-team votes last season, and he's taking the opposition's best wing. Wondering how a team that needed a 15-5 closing kick just to make the play-in field, how are they now running roughshod over the association? How about the fact that all 8 players who had a negative plus-minus rating last season are either no longer on the team or currently not on the active roster? They had 3 guys, Kelly Oubre at minus 189, James Wiseman at minus 183, and Eric Pascal at minus 113, who had a negative, whose negative plus-minus was well over 100. Pascal's gone. Oubre's gone. Wiseman's still on the injured list. I mean, the Nets are the Dubs' latest victim, and Golden State, to me, made a statement in that 117-99 win over KD and company. Green locked up Durant, who shot just 6 of 19 and was held scoreless in the 3rd quarter, going 0 for 8 from the field, including 0 for 4 from 3. With Green being the primary defender on 5 of those 8 misses, the Nets were outscored 35-18 in the 3rd quarter. And Wiggins checked Harden, who shot 6 of 13 from the floor, but had only 4 assists against 5 turnovers. Curry, by the way, dropped 37 points in 29 minutes, 12 of 19 from the floor, 9 of 14 from 3. I mean, the Warriors are doing all of this without Wiseman, who they still expect, big things from once he returns. And Klay Thompson, who finally is participating in 5-on-5s. First time was earlier this week since his Achilles injury, but he's still several weeks away from being ready to join Steph in the Warriors backcourt. It was no surprise to hear the Barclays Center crowd, chanting MVP, MVP during the game. What was surprising is they were doing it for Curry and not KD, and that pretty much tells you all you need to know. Guys, the Dubs are back, and they're only going to get better, and that should scare the hell out of the rest of the NBA, but it will make it fun for us as fans to have them and their style of basketball back in the headlines again.
First of all, Steph Curry is the most exciting player in the NBA. Like, you marvel at him when he's at his best, and what you saw last night was his best. By the way, I look at this, and it's just amazing. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys averaging double-digit minutes on this team, 11 guys with positive PERs. Oh, yeah. And you were talking about Wiseman coming back and Thompson coming back. Out of those 11 people, none of them are their freaking 2 lottery picks. from a year ago. Moses Moody hasn't really gotten to see the floor because there hasn't been a spot for him in this lineup. And they're starting to work in Kuminga, who is perfect for this lineup because he is a natural scorer and can almost slow down the game, but can almost provide an opposite of what Curry does. Like,
but what's gotten him into the rotation, Rabbi, has been his defense. And here's, and I forgot to mention, let's not underestimate the institutional knowledge and the championship DNA, some of which that this team has had during the Curry era. They lost a little bit of that when they let Andre Iguodala go. Getting him back, what he brings to that team with his basketball IQ and his knowledge of how the Golden State system works, the veteran leadership, what he brings, the intangibles, cannot be understated. I felt that that losing him was a mistake. You can't have enough glue guys. I mean, so having him back is big. I mean, you want to talk about where this defensive rating coming. Well, obviously the first guy we go to is Draymond, but how about a little love for Junior Glove, Gary Porter, Gary Payton II has kind of forced his way into the rotation because he's been hell on wheels guarding guards for this team. So maybe defense at the backcourt is in his DNA from his dad. But I mean, holy hell! I mean, you think about their championship era, Rabbi. These were. The way they moved the ball was so much fun to watch. These guys were Clay and Steph and the Splash Brothers things, raining threes down all over you and, blowing guys out offensively. Their defense was underrated. They are making this transition that they are tops in the league, not so much because of how much they're scoring, more because of the fact that they're not letting anybody else score. And that's phenomenal to me.
It's just they were a tiger ready to get out of its cage, and now, like I said, you wonder what's about to happen when Wiseman and Thompson come back in the lineup, because it's not, the NBA is not this thing where you can magically take a wand, add two players to an already 12 to 13 man rotation, which is also the scariest thing about this team, and expect it to hum. And that's what's going to be the most interesting thing. We were always saying how Klay Thompson will be a boost, and he can still be a boost, but you're going to have to adjust to him. And that's going to be the fun part about this, and maybe the scary part for the Warriors.
Yeah, because one of the issues the Warriors had during their championship run was, they had the top five and they could go 7-8 deep. They didn't really have a lot of depth once you got past that, initial 7-man rotation. Steve Kerr's got a lot of depth. He's got quality depth. These guys are not grousing about minutes. These guys are taking whatever minutes they're given. They're going out there and they're putting it all on the floor for however long they're out there. And this team is all in on there's a lot of young guys on this team. We're used to Golden State being a veteran team. There's a lot of young guys here, and they have bought in to the Golden State way of doing things, which is no doubt due to the veteran leadership and Steve Kerr and his staff. But these kids have all bought in to the Golden State way. And I got to tell you, I said it, the rest of the NBA is now on notice. The Warriors are back, and they're coming for you.
And we can talk about Anthony's Lakers pick all we want, but we're going to hold that off until later shows as I continue to tease him about that. But we will get to that too.
They're early.
Yeah. Final thoughts, guys. Thanksgiving is in 8 days. We wanted to share our favorite Thanksgiving memories to close the show. This could be sports related or not. Let's start with Jay.
Thanksgiving was always my favorite holiday growing up. I mean, it had the 4 F's. You had family, you had friends, you had food, and you had football. I mean, what more could a kid like me ask for on a holiday, right? The family would all gather at my aunt and uncle's house. That was a 10-block trip for me growing up, usually after the early game. And then back then, there were only 2 games. And then we'd hang out, eat, watch the late game. And while we were waiting for dessert, we'd go outside. And depending on the number of cousins who came in a given year and play touch football in the street, in between the parked cars up in the Bronx where I live, until my aunt called us from the porch saying it's time for pies, cookies, cake, and more. The holiday hasn't been the same since my aunt and uncle passed, and the touch football games are long gone. but the memories remain, and Thanksgiving is always going to have a special place in my heart. I just, it was a lot of fun growing up with that holiday the way it did in my family.
For me, Thanksgiving, obviously, I played football as well. Recently, about maybe 5-6 years ago, obviously I'm an old man now. I can't do that anymore. Me and some friends and my nephews would go to Mount Prospect Park here along Eastern Parkway, play some light tackle football, some 3-second hold for that matter. But also one of the days is too, I think this is why it's so important to remember, getting together with family. And I think because of this pandemic and dealing with COVID last year, some of that was kind of taken away for a lot of people. And just being able to see families getting together again as a whole, or even turn on NBC early in the morning to watch the Thanksgiving Day parade. And seeing all those people lined up along 6th Avenue, Leeton Town Hall Square, to watch the parade, the floats go by. For me, also, it was just being able to sleep in a little bit. As a kid, you enjoyed any kind of day off from school you'd get. That had nothing to do with a school day, so holidays were always the best. And you realize you had a 4-day weekend with Thanksgiving and the day after. It was gold. But you think about this, the football and some of my greatest football memories, Lawrence Taylor taking over in Detroit, the Bosch coin toss of all things that took place, Randy Moss pretty much making the Cowboys regret passing them up in the draft. So there's so many things that I remember for Thanksgiving, but also I think more importantly, what it's now, we have to remember it's being together. And the family and the friends you get to share those memories with. And also when you see the younger generation now, and they get their own little traditions of their own that they can kind of lean on moving forward. I have friends who are now, parents in their own right, and so it's they have children that they can start traditions of their own. And me, I'm still, I have young nephews now that I get to enjoy it with. So Thanksgiving is definitely one of the best holidays, but it's for so many reasons. But like I said, just being together. I think that's the main theme of Thanksgiving in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think this year, Anthony, with the, things life's kind of slowly starting to get back to some semblance of normalcy. I am going to be thankful for the fact that the whole family can get together as a big big family gathering like it was back in the day when I was younger. And, all of my siblings, all the nieces and nephews, and that's something we haven't had for a little while. So it's going to be, I'm looking forward to having that get back to being the norm again.
So it's kind of funny. Anthony just kind of passed in my Thanksgiving memory. I was never a big turkey fan when I was younger. So one time I went out for Thanksgiving to a restaurant, and because most of the family was away for Thanksgiving, I'm having a big family gathering this year, but it's just literally my mom, my dad, and me. And I ordered stuffed flounder from the menu because I hated turkey at that. I didn't hate turkey, but I wasn't the biggest fan of turkey. And I'm like, ooh, there's other options that you could have on Thanksgiving. But I did that, had fun, came back, watched the end of the football game. It was Lions Steelers, and it was the Phil Luckett literally throwing the coin in the air, Jerome Bettis saying the word tails to everybody except Phil Luckett, who was literally inches away, and rewarding the ball to the Lions to start overtime. Back then, it was sudden death. Jason Hansen kicked the field goal 3 minutes in, and the Steelers lost that game. It's a very known Thanksgiving Day memory. Obviously, you could also mention the first Leon Lett game.
Yes.
Miami.
Yeah.
The snow is a big example. Just watching those traditional Dallas games. and a Detroit game every now and then. Detroit's never really been the most interesting team in the world, but just seeing those moments are really fun. And that's football. I mean, family is obviously the number one football, especially
Yeah, always enjoyed it, Rabbi, when the Lions and the Cowboys would have a divisional opponent as the matchup on Thanksgiving Day. To me, that made those games more meaningful because division games are obviously more meaningful, especially with the Lions game, because there's so much history in the NFC, in the NFC Norris, as Chris Berman is fond of saying.
And it's kind of funny, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, cut you off, but you also think about this: Thanksgiving has showcased the two greatest quarterbacks of all time each year, Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith, respectively. So, in the early window, you would have Barry Sanders' brilliance, whether it was the game he had against Chicago back in the 1997 season, a route to run for 2,000 yards, and then you went in the late game, you will have Emmitt Smith and the Cowboys going up against maybe Green Bay or. It was a pivotal playoff game in the playoff standings because it was always the Cowboys' big three involved. And there was a team like maybe Miami that come in and somehow pull an upset in part because of Leon Lett having a mental cramp at the end of a game. Or Jason Garrett making a name for himself and being a star player. And for me, it was how I found out Toe Duncan actually exists.
Yes.
With John Madden.
Yes.
With a chicken, a turkey, and a duck all in one and dressing in between each layer. I didn't think it existed. It actually does. There are restaurants who make it. I don't know who, but you probably can do some research on it. And I'll never forget John Madden on national TV kind of slicing a Toe Duncan with his bare hand. And just having dressing everywhere in the broadcast booth.
Yeah, Thanksgiving has definitely given us a lot of fun football memories to go along with our fun family memories.
All right, let's get your local turducken out of here and let's enjoy Thanksgiving today. We will be off next week, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. Well, I need to finish with the closing. For myself, Stephen Rabinowitz about to start my 38th year of existence, and these other two, Jay Kaplan over here, who will not be playing football this year, and Anthony Strait, who unfortunately did not become the fourth Antetokounmpo brother in his trip to Athens. This has been On the Sports Lines. We'd also like to thank everyone who are watching live on Facebook, facebook.com/onthesportslines, and on demand on YouTube, youtube.com/onthesportslines. And since you were really quick to cut us off immediately and leave the show, Jay, why don't you tell us what?
And, apologies there. And, you can find us on Twitter at ONTH Sportslines, where you'll find a link to this show and some other interesting articles and sports notes that we think you'll find worth a look.
Back again in 2 weeks. We'll talk to you then. Good night, everybody.
Happy